Hello. Today we're going to have a look at some definitions of triplets, shuffle, swing, everything to do with the number 3. In order to understand the number 3, we have to go through the number 2, unfortunately. I prefer to think of straight time, which is the traditional, regular, totally standard method of counting music, in terms of 2s. What we've got in front of us here is a straight time pattern in 4/4. And what I want you to look at is this phrase in terms of pairs. Each one of these pairs takes up one beat. So that's straight time. We're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and inside each one of those beats, we're counting to 2. Now the reason why I'm focusing so much on the number 2 is because when we move on to look at triplets, you're going to see that each of these pairs turns into 3. Here is exactly the same size of phrase, so we're still looking at a 1-bar phrase, but now we've got 12 notes instead of 8. Every one of those pairs of notes has been split into 3, and this is an example of triplets. And instead of counting 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, we're counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Everything to do with triplets is based on the number 3. You take 2 beats and turn them into 3. In score notation, that's how it's represented. If a classical composer writing a score wants to tell you that there's a triplet, then you get the 3 notes notated with a little line and a number 3 above it to say, play these 3 notes in the space that 2 would normally occupy. That's what the concept of triplets means. And triplet time has a fundamentally different feeling to straight time. When you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, it's very precise, kind of military-like. Whereas when you're counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you almost can't help your shoulders move. It feels, it rolls. Now straight time and triplet time can be combined in any musical phrase. So let's have a look at an example of that. Here we've got a 2-bar pattern. And the first part of the phrase here contains triplets. All of these notes are triplets. The second half of the phrase is straight time. And can you see the grid lines behind the notes? I'm having a difficult time making much sense of this. The first part, it seems that the notes are out of sequence with these quantized lines. Nothing makes sense. If we just focus on this part of the phrase and switch our quantized grid to 8th triplets instead, now suddenly everything lines up. If you're going to be using features like snap or quantize, Cubase needs to understand where you want to move those notes, how long you want them to be, what you want their start positions to be. And so this is what we use our quantized grid for. And for the first part of the phrase, we're in triplets. For the second part of the phrase, triplets don't work. See, some of these notes aren't aligned to any beat pattern. Whereas if I switch back to standard time, now the notes are aligned. We have some little notes here that don't fit neatly inside our 1/8 pattern. Well, that's no problem. Just increase the resolution of your quantized grid to 16s, and now everything lines up perfectly. So let's hear this pattern and see what it sounds like. Now it's fine, it works, but to my ears coming out of triplets where you've got this rolling, 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 when it hits straight time, it suddenly feels constrained, tight, and I want to make it a little bit looser. And this is where the second of our terms comes in, which is swing. Now, whereas triplets are mathematically perfect, triplet notes are a perfect 3:2 ratio in terms of size as compared with the straight time notes, none of that applies to swing time. Swing time is a subjective, judgment-based measurement that individual musicians might disagree on. So it's all about feel. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to apply some swing to this pattern. Now I'm going to leave the triplet side of things completely alone. Swing doesn't generally have anything to do with triplets because triplet time has its own built-in sense of feeling, whereas straight time is the thing that needs a little bit of help. And in fact, you'll find that if you switch to a triplet time notation in Cubase, there's a Quantize Swing option that is grayed out. It won't actually let you swing triplets. Whereas if we switch back to straight time, we're going to use this Quantize Swing option to try to help us make this second half of the phrase a little bit more musical. So what I'm going to do is use my ears. I'm going to try to make these two notes sound better. Now the G2 feels like it's too early, it's too urgent, so I'm going to push it back in time. Take snap off. Not bad. So let's say I'm happy with that. It feels more natural now. What I've just done there is I've made these two notes swing. Swing means for any pair of notes, make the first note longer than the second note. It's really simple. That literally is all swing is. So you're creating this delay, sliding the second note towards the next beat, and you kind of feel a sense of suspension, and then when the note occurs, it kind of drags along lazily. I'm using all of these woolly terms like feels and seems. That's the whole point. That's what swing's all about. Now then, now that we've done it by ear, let's try to make sense from Cubase's perspective what we've actually done. Have a look at this grey line in the interface behind us, and I'm going to start increasing the swing factor. You see the grey line moving? And there we go, we just touched the note. Now let's have a look at what the swing says. It says 36%. So by ear, by feel, I've made these notes swing by 36%. No classical score-based notation is going to be able to make much sense of that. You imagine trying to notate those notes, how many joined up notes you're going to need, and dots and bars, and classical score is just not designed for this kind of interpretive nonsense. It needs straight lines and clearly defined formulae like 3-2. It can understand that. But this, how does it feel 36%? Where does that fit in? It doesn't. Okay, so now that we've made these notes swing, let's try to fix the rest of the phrase as well. Well, before we get on to the difficult bit, which is these fast notes, I'm going to apply a little bit of automatic processing to these second notes. I'm going to make this pair swing in just the same way that the A and G swung. And because I've still got my swing value set up here, I can click Apply Quantize to these selected notes. So it's just going to quantize the notes that I've got selected. And now you saw the C2 move. And so these two notes are now swinging. Let's see what that sounds like. Just need to extend that length to make it sound more natural. Excellent. So see how it's just feeling more organic now, more natural. Okay, let's fix this little quick phrase here. Now, with the 1/8 quantized settings that I've got at the moment, nothing's going to work. I don't have a quantized line that these two Fs can go anywhere near. So I'm going to have to increase the resolution of my grid. And if I switch to 16ths, now we've got something to work with. But if we're quantizing to 16ths, we need to swing in 16ths as well. And that's going to give you a different resolution, a different swing percentage to work with for these notes. The way to demonstrate that is to first of all do it by ear. Let's try to get these notes to swing how we want them to sound in our ears. Doing this completely by ear. That's pretty good actually. I'm happy with that. Now that we've got the notes sounding how we want them to sound, let's find out what we just did. How much did we make these notes swing by? Well, if I increase the swing grid until I hit those two Fs, it's about there. 54%, it's a different number. Now that we're swinging to a different level of resolution, we've got a different percentage in this box. Don't let Cubase or any digital number tell you how swing works. You've got to work by ear. But once you've kind of derived what that number is, what you're happy with in the phrase, there's absolutely nothing stopping you then applying this template elsewhere in your song. So if, for instance, I enter the Quantize panel, you can see that I'm currently set to 1/16 worth 54. So Cubase kind of knows what this quantized value is. Well, you can click Save Preset, and now that's a selectable value. So anywhere else in your song, if you have a different phrase, but the same kind of pattern to the notes, the speed that you're playing them at, it's perfectly reasonable to say, well, let's try the 54% swing that I had earlier. Put it on, see what it sounds like. If it's good to your ears, great. You've just saved yourself that process of manually moving those notes to where you want them to be. So let's hear that whole phrase now. And it's just now the straight time section, which is supposed to be military and precise, has the same kind of feeling as the first part, which is in triplet time. Great stuff. So we've got triplets and swing sorted. The next definition we need to come across is shuffle. Shuffle is a weird kind of hybrid of the two, and I can't say with any absolute certainty whether or not it fits into the triplet side of the equation or the straight side of the equation, because it's a little bit of both. And in order to demonstrate it, move to our next phrase. So you will have heard this bass line a million times in a million blues songs. This is a shuffle bass line. And what's happening is that the first note is playing twice as long as the second note. Now at the moment we're still in our crazy quantized grid pattern. But what I'm going to do is switch to eighth triplets. So we're having a look at this. We're looking at it in triplet time at the moment. And you can see that now all of the notes line up perfectly. And the first note occupies twice as much space. It might not be playing for the entire length of time, but it occupies twice as much space. And there are holes in the music. This middle part of each beat is missing some sound. What shuffle says is that the first beat should be twice as long as the second beat. And that's where it starts coming into the whole, is it a triplet, is it straight time conversation? Because we're looking at this in triplet time at the moment, and we can see this note here is exactly twice as long as the note behind it. This note is virtually twice as long. It's kind of there, but we're just not playing it for the whole period of time. There's our short note, long note, short note, long note with a bit missing, short note, long note, short note. So it fits perfectly well in triplet time and can be easily explained. But there is another way we can think about this as well, which is to shift back to straight time. And now momentarily our grid is wrong. But what I'm going to do is swing the grid by 100%. And so what I'm saying now is that the first note is swinging as hard as Cubase can make it swing. Basically, we talk about the strength of swing, whether swing is hard or soft, hard or light, by how much the beat line moves, how much closer to the next beat the intermediate beat line moves. So at 0%, we're perfectly aligned in straight time. And then as we increase our swing, that's 30%, 50%, 70%, closer and closer to the ratio of 2 to 1. This note is now twice as long as that note. So do we represent it in straight time or triplet time? That's a really difficult question to answer. Personally, I use triplet time because if you have like solo phrases and you're trying to represent it in swung time, like this is straight time swung by 100%. Firstly, it's just a faff to set up. You know, the interface doesn't look particularly elegant. You've got these weird kind of different divisions of, but more importantly, when I'm playing a solo, I've got notes missing. I've lost the flexibility to put notes in that kind of gap. The shuffle leaves the gap in the middle. The bass line is completely happy and wants that gap there. But when I'm playing my solo line over the top, this note doesn't have any quantized grid to align to, whereas in triplet time, it does. So personally, that's how I work. I don't think of shuffle as a straight time groove. I think of it as a triplet time groove. Now, notationally and traditionally, there is a hybrid method of approaching this problem, and it's to use a different time signature. You'll very often see, we're talking about the blues here, this is a classic kind of blues shuffle kind of rhythm. You'll see it notated in 12/8. Let's have a look at that, see what's going on there. So I need to switch my time signature from 4/4 to 12/8. And now because we've got more beats in the bar, I need to actually increase the tempo as well. I need to increase the tempo by a ratio of 3 to 2 to keep everything consistent. So if I go from 80 BPM to 120 in 12/8 time, this bass line is going to sound exactly the same as it previously did. So let's just take a moment to figure out what's going on here, because this can be a little bit confusing. Here we are in this weird exotic time signature, looking at these notes that at the moment don't fit any pattern. See, this D2 isn't on any grid line. What happens if I switch back to straight time? Suddenly, magically, all of the notes align to the grid. So this is where 12/8 comes into its own, because we now don't have to notate in terms of triplets. We're back in straight time. It's easier for score to be notated. You don't have to use any triplet symbology, and everything fits perfectly inside the grid. So this is why you'll see blues songs or shuffle songs notated in 12/8. It's a compromise, a notational compromise, to allow you to easily represent something that's actually 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 in straight time. Hope you found the video useful. If you did, please consider subscribing, hit notifications. You'll make sure not to miss my other content. Hope to see you then. Thanks very much.